Dr. Sleep was adapted from the 2013 Stephen King novel of the same name and follows the story of an adult Danny Torrance. Danny, traumatized from his experience at the Overlook Hotel and struggling with the alcoholism he inherited from his father, decides to get sober and begins working as an orderly at a hospice facility. He meets a young girl named Abra who, like him, has the Shining and finds out that there is a group of psychic vampires preying upon psychic children in order to absorb their essence and prolong their lives. When this trailer first dropped, I don't think a lot of people realized that Stephen King had actually written a sequel to The Shining and thought that this was just another studio cash grab, a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining only. But yeah, this was a book, an outstanding book that I love. But unlike most King adaptations, I wasn't too nervous about this being terrible because Mike Flanagan was doing it, and after Gerald's Game and The Haunting of Hill House, he has gained my trust. Flanagan has a talent for getting you to care deeply for the characters in his films, which is very important for something like Dr. Sleep. This story is deeply emotional and deals with a character who has horrible trauma not only from what we saw go on in The Shining, but from his drinking. This is not a story that can afford to distance itself from its more emotional aspects in the way that Kubrick chose to do with The Shining. As we all know by now, when it comes to The Shining, there are some strikingly huge differences between King's novel and Kubrick's adaptation of it. I'm someone who loves both versions dearly. They are two completely different experiences and both are masterpieces within their medium, in my opinion. So not only did Flanagan have the difficult task of adapting and condensing a lengthy novel into a feature-length film, but making the necessary adjustments to have it work well as a sequel to Kubrick's version of the story, and honestly, he nailed it. One of the things I really liked about this film is how they made the choice to just cast different actors to play the characters that show up from the previous film. There is none of this face replacement or de-aging nonsense, and I was so relieved. And I really wish more films chose to go this route because the alternative 9 times out of 10 is super distracting. I thought Ewan McGregor did a great job as Danny, and Kylie Curran is just so charismatic and fit into the role of Abra really well. The standout performance that has everybody talking, though, is of course Rebecca Ferguson as the villain Rose the Hat. And I gotta say, the hype was real. She does a really good job. Rose is the leader of this predatory group of psychics who preys on little kids, and as you can imagine, she's a real bitch. But like most good villains, she is incredibly charming as well, and Ferguson does a great job portraying every layer of her. Another thing I really liked is that Flanagan doesn't try to make this in the style of Kubrick at all, aside from the stuff that they reshot to use for flashbacks. If you've seen his other stuff, you'll notice that this is very much a Mike Flanagan looking film. This is a very long book with a lot of characters, and they managed to successfully condense this entire story down without having to leave a tremendous amount out. This story deals with a lot of different characters in a lot of different locations, and I think if it was in less capable hands, it could have turned out very messy. Like I said, I really loved this book, and when I heard it was going to be adapted at some point, I was like, I think it has to be a show because there's literally no way that you can cover this much ground in just a couple of hours, but they do. And they do a really good job. I really only have one nitpick, and that has to do with something that might only bug you if you've read the book. So early on in the film, when Danny hits bottom and decides to get sober, it's for a very specific reason. Something very traumatic happens because of his drinking, and in the book, this event haunts him constantly, and he is so ashamed of it that it's the only secret he won't tell in his Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. It's such a huge motivating factor in his life, and it haunts him far more than his experience at the hotel does, because he feels so much guilt over it. In the film, they do show this thing that happens, and then they just sort of don't bring it up again. It's not a huge deal overall, but again, if you've read the book, it might bug you a little bit. In a recent interview, Ewan McGregor stated that he thinks that Mike Flanagan managed to make something that's going to make both King and Kubrick fans happy, and I think he's right. I'm both of those things, and this movie made me very happy. The changes that Flanagan made in order to make Dr. Sleep line up well with Kubrick's version of The Shining are very clever and pretty seamless overall. This is a well-paced, entertaining film, and I highly recommend going to see it if you get a chance. And I give it a seriously don't worry it's good out of 10. Thank you for watching.